She lost her life because of the failures of our system. I lost my business as a result of it. I had no idea it was guilty till proven innocent. One of the police constables jokingly told me, he said, "We realize that you're not guilty in this." He said, "But sorry to say, if you went back in the house, it'd be quicker if you had a sex change." And he said that trying to inject some humor. I saw the humor in it at the time, but later on I realized the bias was enormous. I grew up in a home where my parents never raised their voice. I was never struck. Well, I had 25 years of absolute wonderful marriage. Rarely, very rarely a raised voice. Lots of love and laughter in the house. Two great kids. The stressor started probably when both my kids were bullied in the school system. That was probably where my wife's anxiety kicked in. She'd always had a bit of a disorder. I thought for the most part it was kind of behind her and over with. And then the recession kicked in, and that's really where the start of the tirades, the rants, the name calling, and the cheap shots. I was never a victim of physical violence, but was on the receiving end of a whole lot of anger and a whole lot of hostility. And yes, I lost my temper a few times, but never raised my hand. That never happened. What then happened is I had the first stab to the heart. I discovered my wife's affair. That was a major blow to me. It just hurt like hell. And we went for counseling, and that's when I started to discover the biases. The marriage counselor just naturally assumed my wife's rants about my anger were all me and no responsibility for my wife. That became a bit of a point of frustration, and I started to see things a little differently. Then my wife felt she really needed to see a psychiatrist and see some deep counseling, and she acknowledged that I had nothing to do with that background of hers. She really needed to quote, find herself and heal from some of her earlier experiences, before me in fact. I remember the day I sort of dropped her off at the GO station with her stuff packed, and just wished her well, gave her a hug, and I was still trying to salvage the marriage, and expected her to come back after a couple of months of therapy and try to regroup and rebuild our lives. What then happened, unfortunately, was I got served with divorce papers, which came as a complete shock, and I had not strayed, she had. I discovered she'd had a boyfriend, and I just sort of took a deep breath and realized I was a statistic and needed to just rebuild my lives. And my boys and I were living in our home, and as my eldest put it, everything was calm once Mom was out of the way. He recognized her angst and anger was causing a lot of friction. It hadn't been like that. It's only been like the last couple of years. Then on, I know the exact date because it's really easy to remember, November 11th, 2011, I was in the home. She knocked on the door. I greeted her at the door. I hadn't seen her for a while. We talked and chatted once in a while. And she'd already been admitted to a mental hospital a couple of times, both under, I think it's Form 1, danger to yourself or others, and under 72-hour watch. And she said she wanted back into the house and wanted to cohabitate as we worked our way through this, and I was agreeable to that. But then she lost her temper, as she was very prone to do, got into an absolute hysterical rant, yelling and screaming, and then dialed 911. And I just shrugged my shoulders and said, okay, whatever. And I sat patiently on the stairs of the house in our front hall, waiting for the police to show up. And the police showed up, and they questioned my sons and myself and said, yeah, your son's, tell the same story. She hasn't been here for 5 or 6 months. But the police officer says, you have to pack up and leave. To which I said, why do I have to pack up and leave? She's been living at her boyfriend's the last few months. She just wants back in the house. I have my business here. Doesn't matter, you have to leave. I said, I've done nothing wrong. She just showed up unannounced. what is it that I've done wrong? Nothing, you have to leave. And they just kept harping on this. It was me. I then said, they also had asked if I had firearms, to which I said, yes, I do. They were all legit, licenses, trigger locks, and all secure. I asked the police officer to please take these, because if I'm not in the house, I don't want to leave them behind for her. I was a little fearful because of her anger. I then found myself packing my suitcase to leave my home, and I have a business there, and I was working to rebuild it after some damage she'd already done, and I then had to go find myself a place to live. So I slept in my truck for the first night before, because I couldn't find a friend at whatever time of day that was to put me up, and then slept on the couch and was homeless for the next 4 months as I watched my business tank, watched the tirades continue, and left my 2 boys behind with their mom. About 2 weeks later, she threw my eldest son out of the house because he refused to give her money because she was going to buy dope and booze. She claimed she had no food in the house, but when I got back into the house after she passed away, which is another sad part of this story, I'm sorry that hurts, I wasn't allowed to help. I was cut out of the loop completely. The medical and legal system didn't want to hear anything I had to say or anything I want to put forward, including my own sons, who just said, my mom needs help. She lost her life because of the failures of our system. I lost my business as a result of it. I had no idea it was guilty till proven innocent. One of the police constables jokingly told me, he said, we realize that you're not guilty in this. He said, but sorry to say, if you went back in the house, it'd be quicker if you had a sex change. And he said that trying to inject some humor. I saw the humor in it at the time, but later on I realized the bias was enormous. She ran around with her boyfriend, had my eldest son also out of the home. He was actually coming home with groceries. So it's not as if he wasn't willing to cooperate. He was working and he had money to help support her. For the 4 months I was not in the home, I was paying for the mortgage, the insurance, the utilities, even the cable TV. So I wound up homeless, lost my business, had to fight the system, and to boot, I had her telling the neighbors stories about, apparently I didn't realize this, but I was a drunk, aggressive, mean-spirited womanizer. I don't know who she was describing, but as my kids would tell you, it's not my dad. My kids were entitled to live because they were close enough to being of age. They could live with whoever they wanted to live with. I had no place to put them because I was homeless. I finally got an apartment in January, about 2 or 3 weeks before she passed away. And my eldest son immediately moved in. My youngest son said, I can't leave her. She's not right of mind. When we'd had a discussion with a lawyer trying to get her some help, the lawyer said, you can't have your kids in court because we can't go up against her. I said, we're trying to get her help. That's all I want. I'm not there to cause any more friction or any more damage. She's already unstable. And when the solicitor said, no, we can't do that, my boys and I had a damn good cry outside the lawyer's office, and my eldest said, this is not going to end well. This is just not going to end well. We can't help Mom. I was paying for all the bills. I was quite willing to do whatever it took. I'd already lost my business. Add to that some of the mouthing off that she did. Even doctors said that I was guilty of 30 years of brutality. I don't know how a doctor comes up with that with no evidence based on hearsay. As a professional, I can't do that. I can't call you a tax cheat. She had all of the voice and I had none. It is just, the whole system is just twisted. When I went back to my home after my wife had passed away and we discovered there were, and I'm sorry this hurts, about 100 bottles of pills strewn throughout the house in various places. The coroner said this was a disaster waiting to happen. And during the course of all this, I never had a say in any of it. I was removed from my own home. The very person who was trying to provide the income to support everybody, including my wife, was denied that opportunity. The records that I wanted and needed to run my business took 4 weeks to get to me, by which time I'd lost a lot of business, most of it, and it's very difficult to run a business out of the back of a vehicle. The whole system just smacks of wrong. There are men who use their fists and should be locked up for it. I was not one of those, but I got tarred and feathered as if I was. She was mentally ill, never officially diagnosed, I didn't know, but likely schizophrenia. I'm not a physician, so I can't comment, but her behavior smacked of that, and even doctors, from what I know, say that it's very difficult to diagnose in truth. She was self-medicating, and that's a problem in Ontario. You can go to multiple locations and multiple doctors and get medications that conflict. I tried to get my younger son, when he was out of the system, he dropped out of school within a week or two of his mother coming to the home. She says, because I can't leave. She'll do herself some harm. And I didn't dare talk to him because she might do him harm, because my eldest son said, I can't talk, Dad. If Mom catches me even emailing or anything, she'll go ballistic. So I basically lost touch with my 2 kids. And the system just is so twisted. I'd already called the school board, and they didn't even bother to return my calls. Several times I tried calling. No response. And I was just cut out of the loop. I was not, persona non grata, just like not entitled to have any information. I finally managed to get hold of somebody at the school, and they gave me his attendance, and you can watch the pattern, and he just stopped school shortly after she showed up. What she also did was cut me off internet, telephone, even my own credit card. She made it very difficult for me to deal with any of this stuff.
On what grounds did the cops remove you from your home?
None. Just, they have to. That's what they do.
Did they arrest you?
No. No charges. You just have to leave the home. You have an hour and a half. We'll take our time.